Have you ever been in a meeting where one person dominated the discussion and they didn't even have the best ideas? Have you tried to reach effective and collaborative decisions with others, but quickly found that the dynamics of the meeting devolved into an adversarial battle between one side and another, and win-lose dynamics cropped up, and people seemed to get more interested in who would win and who would lose than getting the best decision? And have you ever found that you've reached a decision and then discovered that not everybody really agreed on the same understanding of what the decision was, or they weren't bought in enough on the decision that they really supported the implementation? And as a result, a decision was made, but it didn't get implemented effectively, and the results that you wanted weren't achieved. Well, you're not alone in these circumstances. All of us encounter these in our day-to-day life. And in fact, there's something very fundamental about us as humans that prompts these dynamics. It lies deep within our brains. Because when we're in these situations where we feel we have something to win or something to lose, we tend to build up fears about what might happen if we don't get our way. And we now know in the brain science that's available that this triggers a response in the amygdala deep within the limbic part of the brain. It shoots the adrenaline down into our body and gets us into that fight or flight mode that our ancestors used to battle the tigers or to flee from them. But you know, the kind of issues that we have today are not issues of are we going to kill the tiger or are we going to run away, but they're rather much more complex. There are things like you're dealing with. You know, how are you going to implement the teacher-scholar model? What's the strategic direction you'd like to have for your department? What are the key hires and in which specialties are they going to be to advance the future of your colleagues in your scholarship? And how are you going to help your students move through and get their degrees in a more timely way? These kinds of issues have many interests that are impacted by them and have a critical need to bring forth the best faculties in our thinking. But you know, it's when we have that adversarial sort of approach, that pre-programmed response to these issues, that we lose our best thinking, because the neuroscience shows us that under those circumstances of fear and adversarial dynamics, the best parts of our brain for solving today's issues shut down. The prefrontal cortex, the executive function of the brain, the cerebral lobes that are engaged to come up with creative solutions, actually lose metabolism, they lose energy, they lose firing power when all of that energy is going to that limbic system in the fight or flight and fearful dynamics. So as leaders, we need to change these dynamics. We need to, like in our computers, we need to do, when they're pre-programmed for particular settings, we need to make a conscious decision to override those pre-programmed settings. And of course, the pre-programmed settings for our brain have a continuing value, because if we're in the middle of the street and a car's rushing by, we got to jump out. We can't dicker in our minds, should I do this or shall I do that? So they still have a function. But they don't have a very powerful and constructive function when we're dealing with tough issues that need to get solved in today's environment. And so that's where you need the human software for success. And that's what the book, How Great Decisions Get Made, 10 Easy Steps for Reaching Agreement on Even the Toughest Issues, is all about. It's the human software for solving today's issues. And this requires a conscious decision on your part to override those other dynamics, to choose these steps and to follow the steps, because if we don't, it's very easy to backslide into the typical ways that we encounter and deal with issues along the way. So I invite you to really embark on this as an inquiry, as an experiment, to see how it works for you. Now, the wonderful thing about this process is that you can practice it at home for work. It even works with wily teenagers in the household and solving issues with them. You can do it at work and then apply it at home. You can use it in community settings. I encourage you to try all of those so that you can see what's the utility of this, how versatile is it for you in your life, and what can you learn from the results. So to assist you in this journey and to help you use your better brain to solve these important issues with and for one another, I've got a number of additional resources for you beyond the book itself. Because I found after I wrote the book, people said, well, can you give us even more stories and examples than the ones in the book? And can you help highlight how this process works in practice in those circumstances? So as I've worked with Fortune 100 companies on the toughest issues they have in the boardroom, to communities that are wrestling over big development issues, and academic institutions that are looking to what their future might hold and how they can work together to accomplish those. In a whole raft of situations, we've come up with lots of different stories and examples. So I made available a copy of the 2 CDs that are in this pack, 90 minutes of discussion about the 10 steps and ways that you can put them into practice. That's also available on Amazon if you wish to have your own copy, but there's a loaner copy that's available through Mary Peterson. And then I've also provided some additional tools, and that is, I found it really useful in practical terms to help people walk through the decision process with a worksheet. So this is also available for you, and it guides you through the 10 steps. You can write down the results as you go along, and it's very helpful to assist you in keeping that process in mind and to track how to put the steps into action. Now, one of the other things that I found is that sometimes we're in circumstances where we can't say, hey, wait, time out, let's take a look at how we can apply this new 10-step process and so on and so forth. We have to do it on the fly. So I have a chapter in the book that talks about a guerrilla application of this. What to do when you're not in charge or when you don't have time to explain it to everybody, but you just need to drop in and start to change the dynamic in powerful ways. So you'll see on this goldenrod sheet on the back, each of the steps is described in sort of common kind of street language, if you will, that you can just introduce into your circumstances to help people see, oh yeah, let's try this other approach. You know, like, all right, who are the people that have a stake in this? And have we included them? And shouldn't we try to figure out some way to do that? Because otherwise we're going to be missing out on their input and they're going to be feeling alienated from the decision. Or, yeah, let's discuss what our hopes are here rather than our fears about this circumstance, because our hopes will help us guide us to what we want rather than to what we're trying to avoid. And onward through the whole set of discussions. You know, let's get all the options out on the table. When you say these things to people, they make sense. And that's the beauty of this process. It's not rocket science. Some of this may seem very commonsensical to you. But in the tough moments that we encounter, this is what we forget. This is what gets overridden by that pre-programmed response that we have to the fearful dynamics of many decision-making circumstances. So these are the practical things that I invite you to decide that you're going to put into practice instead of being beholden to and hijacked by the fearful responses that so often dictate what happens in our lives. Now, one other thing that I found really useful is to keep these things front of mind. So although I've been doing this work for over 10 years, and for 10 years prior to the book coming out, was working on developing these things, I found it extraordinarily helpful to have it in my wallet every day, and I keep it to this day, a wallet card that has a very simple summary of the 10 steps in the process. Now, why do I do this? Obviously, I know what the 10 steps are, but in the heat of the moment, I forget. My brain gets hijacked by the fears and concerns of the moment, and I need something to help remind me of how to go forward with this process. So I hope that these resources that I'm making available to you, and most of all, your best efforts, your good intentions, and your thoughtful insights and exploration of these topics will serve you in your work, in your home, and in your community, and help us all to come forward and to be agents of hope in a fearful world that's hungering for fresh solutions. Thank you very much, and have a great exploration.